This is a Chojubai quince. In other words, it is a Japanese quince, but then the dwarf variety Chojubai. This is unique in that it gets a very nice old broken up bark with age. It will take about 20 years, so this is actually a very old one because the bark is starting to break up. The problem with quince is if you allow suckers down low to grow, the top will stop developing. Very clearly to be seen, I've not pruned this tree this year yet, and you can tell the top has hardly developed and I've got lots and lots of suckers. But the good thing is, it is now August, and in August these suckers, they root very well. So let's get going, let's propagate these, plant them up and show you what they look like. Now mind you, if I say dwarf, it doesn't mean that it has to stay a tiny plant like this. There are also much bigger plants, like this one. You see these shoots, they're quite large. They can still grow about 30 centimeters a foot in one season. They just fatten up very slow, they have small leaves compared to the regular Japanese flowering quince. But yeah, they do develop slowly, they do not grow very quick, very big. But they don't have to stay this small. Now propagation doesn't have to be all that difficult. I am using a rooting gel, and I always take a little bit out and I just put it on a tiny little lid so that I don't pollute the stock, right? Then I've got a pot with fine substrate. It is full of water because I just watered it, and this is mostly pumice. This is just leftover siftings from when I cleaned out my substrate, and I removed the finest of the fine, so these are about 1 millimeter kernels. You can also use vermiculite, which works really well as well. And I like to take a piece of wire and just punch a bunch of holes in there where I can later on slide the cuttings in. That way the rooting hormone stays on the cutting a little bit better. Then what else do you need? Sharp scissors. And I use this, a plastic Ziploc baggie, and I put the cuttings in the pot into the baggie so that they don't dry out in the initial weeks. Then you just go, you look for the suckers, and ideally you cut them off as close to the base as possible. Then I just remove the lower leaves and I dip them in the rooting hormone. Then you can directly put them in the substrate, but I prefer to just let them sit for a little bit. That way the rooting hormone can really work on this tissue. I do this for all of the cuttings, and once I have them, then I take my pot and just slide them in. Naturally, if you want lower branches to develop on your main plant, you leave these suckers in place, but you need to prune them in time so that they don't take over the whole plant. But in this case, I don't want any of these suckers to develop into plants. This is a very little one. Not sure this will actually root, but who knows. Now for good measure, there's one branch here that I also don't like, but branches apparently don't root all that well. I've never tried them. I think I now have all of them right. This is the sucker, but this is one that I'm going to keep, and I'm going to wire out as a lower branch in here. And now of course it is key to make sure that all these holes are properly closed. I want all of them nice to stand up, and then I water them once more, and then they go in the baggie. Now these are quite long. Let's see what happens if I also put these in as a cutting rather than as the long stems. Just easier, because then they don't fall over already. And now they go into the garden, dappled shade, and I'll forget about them for the next couple of weeks, and I'll check in 2 or 3 weeks how these are doing. But basically I just leave them alone for a month or so, and then I start opening the baggie more and maybe watering again. These are exciting times. It is the end of summer. It is actually getting towards winter. We are in late September. Winter is around the corner, and I just want to be sure whether my Chojubai rooted. Look at these. They are still nice and green. Now I am going to pull them out of the pot. Of course I don't have to, right? I can leave them in this pot for another season, but I want to know how many have rooted, and maybe I can even put them on individual pots for winter. Right. Nice roots. Nice roots. Nice roots. No roots. Small roots. Small roots. Nice roots. And some nice roots. Seems like only one of them did not make it, and it still had leaves, so I could have actually planted it up. I'm not going to. I'm just going to put these in pots and be happy that these have rooted so well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's get some pots and some substrate. And of course, no reason to overcomplicate things, just grab a cutting. Maybe I should just wire them out now, or should I wire them later? No, I'll wire them once they're rooted. So one in a little pot, substrate, done. One in the little pot, substrate, done. And in the last pot, of course, I'm going to have to put 2 because there's only 6 pots here. There we go, 2 of them. Now, of course, you don't press down on a pot like this, you just water them in and you tap them in, right? Let's give these some water and then it will compress and stabilize. There we go, 7 new Chojubai. It's that easy. Almost a complete year has passed. This little Chojubai is pushing again. I can remove the wires from last year. I can prune it again and restart the whole cutting process. Talking about cuttings, this is the sort of growth that I get in my first year. They first need to establish, so this is the cutting of last year. It has fallen over a little bit in the pot and now 2 sprouts have come up. These will start pushing and I start fertilizing them, and now they are ready to start developing as a little bonsai. I could actually wire it out now. I'm not going to. I'm going to slowly let this grow. It's been a bit hot, suffered a little bit, so I'm not going to take any cuttings this year. I'm just going to let it be, and in early spring I'll prune it back. Anyway, this was growing Chojubai cuttings. This was Jelle, growing bonsai. See you next time. But before you leave, maybe take a look at my latest video, or just any other video that you might like. See you next time.